I fought the law and the law won. I fought the law.
Hey, what's up everyone? Jerry from StogieReview.com here with Frank Herrera of La Caridad de Cobra, also cigarlaw.com. And Frank was kind enough to join us tonight to talk about a question that we got on a recent episode of Your Questions, My Answers about Cuban trademarks, about who should legally own them outside of Cuba, and the ethical dilemma: shouldn't it be owned by the family who owned it before the tobacco industry was nationalized in Cuba? So, Frank, I sent you the question ahead of time. You've had a couple of days to think about it. You know, do you want to? I know it's a kind of a loaded question. We talked about it a little bit offline, but what do you think? Is there an ethical? You know, we kind of get mixed up between ethical and legal. They're totally two different things. So, what's your whole take on it? What do you think of the actual question?
Well, let's get something straight. There are no ethics when it comes to business with the Cuban government. I know people will immediately see that as my politics, but it's true. Is there an ethical or moral problem, or I'm not sure how they worded the question. I think there is, but that's not really the issue. The issue is whether marks that were confiscated by the Cuban government are, well, rather, what would happen to those marks should the embargo be lifted, right?
Correct.
Well, the United States has some regulations in place already about confiscated marks. That's kind of what the Bacardi case has been about. Havana Club and some other cases have been about that, confiscated marks. But a lot of these trademark disputes are not about confiscated marks. They're about parallel marks. That is, folks that own the marks in the United States, or companies, and the Cuban government, well, through its Cuba Tobacco and Corporation of Habanos, owning the marks in Cuba. So the question there is what will happen when these parallel marks collide when there is a lifting of the embargo? The answer is we don't really know, honestly. The best guess is that the ownership of the parallel marks will be respected, as it has to be. I don't see Corporation of Habanos or any subsequent entity that falls into their place wanting to challenge some prior rights owned by, say, General Cigar here in the United States. I don't think they'd want to get into that legal fight if it's been clear that Generals own one of these marks, just to give you an example.
Okay.
If it's an issue of confiscated marks, well, a lot of those trademark disputes have already been litigated, and there's not many of those issues in the cigar industry, surprisingly. Most of the issues on confiscated marks have been in the rum industry. What I think is going to happen is I think you'll see a lot of consolidation. As everyone knows, or most people know, Corporation of Habanos is part owned by Altadis, or Altadis, however you want to pronounce it.
Right.
Yeah. But they're Spanish entity, so not necessarily Altadis USA. So I think what will happen is you'll find some consolidation, and you'll see some folks working together, these entities working together to ensure that the Cuban brand exists in the United States. Okay? Because some of these companies, although they say they're not related, they are related. They're sister companies in a way. They will find a way to ensure that those Cuban brands will be sold in the United States. All right? I'm not sure if that makes much sense at all.
It totally makes sense, but as far as the people who owned it pre-revolution, pre-nationalization, they're pretty much screwed.
Well, what happened with a lot of those brands is they've already been sold out. There was a company which was the predecessor to Altadis, Cuban Cigar Brands, I think it was called. They're out of Fort Lauderdale, or they were out of Fort Lauderdale, and they kind of picked up a lot of those brands. There's other companies that picked up smaller brands from Cuban nationals that had their properties confiscated, and they rightfully obtained those brands in the United States.
Okay.
So those issues really aren't live, so to speak. So were there brands confiscated by the Cuban government? Yes, there were. most of those cigar brands were small or insignificant, or their owners did not pick up and continue those brands in the United States. They came here, they became doctors or lawyers or plumbers or something else. They did something else. There are people such as Benny Gomez's family that came here and continued to use or develop new brands on Cayo Ocho. There are many families, that kind of picked up and continued. But it's not the issue like, say, Havana Club that was confiscated for rum. That's which coincidentally, a court of appeals has just affirmed a district court finding that Havana Club, owned by Bacardi, is not false advertising or otherwise in violation of the Lanham Act, much to the chagrin of Pernod, which was kind of working to strangle that brand back. So,
gotcha. You brought up Benny Gomez, and I know a few weeks ago, or maybe like 2 weeks ago, you released a press release talking about Havana Sunrise and Mr. Paul Gross. Maybe a lot of people probably don't know who Paul Gross is and what his deal is. Adam Gross, sorry, Adam Gross is. You want to fill us in? Tell us what Mr. Gross did wrong and what your press release was all about.
Well, I personally don't think he did anything wrong. He is a contractor. I forget the organization he was working for, but he traveled to Cuba a couple of years ago, and he took 2 devices with him into Cuba, and he failed to claim them on his customs form entering into Cuba. The Cuban government discovered that these devices could allow satellite internet connections. It is his position that he was bringing them to a community of a Jewish community that wanted access to the internet in Cuba. Cuban government saw it differently and said that this was an act of espionage, an act to overthrow the government, that he was trying to bring in telecommunication devices to help overthrow the Cuban government, which is pretty amazing, because if you're going to do that, you're not going to do it with one satellite.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but that's the way they see things, and oftentimes I talk about these things, and folks say, well, you're a Cuban exile child, and you're adamant about your politics and all that, and I don't look at it that way. I look at what's so wrong with the internet. If you tell me he brought in some tool of destruction, of mass destruction, or some other tool, whatever it might be, that could actually cause some significant harm, he's an actual terrorist or something else, then I'd say, okay, fine. You're protecting your country, you're protecting, your sovereignty, although I don't agree with your sovereignty, I'd agree with it. But really, if you look at it objectively, he's just trying to bring internet to some folks in Cuba. Anyways, he was arrested. He was held for a long time without trial, so there's really no habeas corpus in Cuba. They finally, under international pressure, decided to try him. Of course, they had a kangaroo court on a Saturday, and shortly thereafter convicted him to 15 years in prison, in a Cuban prison. There's the cicadas in your background?
Yep.
So he had an appeal, and the appeal was not granted. So he is going to stay in a Cuban prison for 15 years. He's getting up in his years. His wife, I believe, is in New York State. I think they're in Maryland or in the D.C. area for sure. I understand that she's ill. I think he has a daughter that's ill as well. There were many, calls for the U.S. government to get involved. Jimmy Carter was down there and was supposed to visit him and really didn't do anything. Long story short, I think it's ridiculous for them to keep him for any reason. So coincidentally, as part of my, cigar law kind of personality or whatever, I have a couple of cases that are against Corporation Habanos. And one of the cases, I represent Benny Gomez's family. His company's called Inter-America Cigar. He has a brand called Havana Sunrise, which has been around for like 15 years, 10 years rather, through a predecessor. Corporation Habanos attacked that trademark shortly before it was going to be incontestable with the trademark office, and I've been helping him for 2 years to fight against Corporation Habanos. Well, in talking with Benny, you know, we said, wouldn't it be cool, and we know it's unlikely, but we said, wouldn't it be cool if we offered to settle this case? We'll give them whatever they want. We'll surrender the trademark registration if they release Alan Gross. And we were laughing about it. Oh, that's ridiculous. They'll never do that. And it's true. They never will do that. But the point of the offer is to show them that they think it's important to oppose trademarks in the United States. They've been doing it for 10 years or more and canceling trademarks. They've done it with Guantanamera, which I've fought for 10 years and it's still going on. Havana Sunrise, Havana Soul. They've attacked many other people. A Zycar has Havana Collection that's still being fought for many years. The owner of Two Guys Cigar Shop, David Garofalo, had a fight with them over Gianna Havana, I think. He gave that fight up. The list goes on, and I've reported a lot of these things at Cigar Law. But we said, you know, wouldn't it be cool if we put our money where our mouth is? And we said, you know what? We really believe that we can win this fight, and we've been fighting for 10 years in other cases. But if you think it's that damn important, we'll give it to you. But let this guy who was just trying to bring internet connection and some type of, you know, freedom of information to the Cuban people, just let him go. You know, just let him go. And if you're interested in that offer, then I'll talk to my other clients that I represent and see if they'll agree to the same thing, surrender their trademarks. You know, we don't believe that they'll accept it, but it's an offer to show that we put our money where our mouth is, and we're not just here, you know, as radical, you know, Cuban exile extremists that are fighting this fight. You know, we're reasonable people, and we think it's ridiculous what's going on. I call Corporation Habanos in Cuba out all the time, and tweets and Cigar Law and over again. You know, I curse at them, and I saw all kinds of things. And for a year or so when I first started that, I didn't think anybody was listening. And then people started listening, which is kind of cool. But I do it because I have a great love for the country. And I do it because I feel for the Cuban people, and I think there's nothing wrong with freedom of expression, freedom of access to internet, which I think is one of the most important freedoms one should have. Just that freedom to find information and not be imprisoned geographically like they are, and imprisoned from cyberspace, really. I hate to use that term, it's dated, but it's true. You know?
The World Wide Web.
Yeah. So anyway.
Gotcha. Well, you know, Frank runs cigarlaw.com. He talks about all things cigar and law related, mostly trademark. What's the big case that you think's out there that you've seen that people should maybe be aware of?
As far as just cigar trademark cases,
yeah,
or
just in general. Just in general, what's the thing that you're spending a lot of your time researching and reading about?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. A couple years ago when I started this, I was kind of maniacal about keeping up with a lot of cases, in all cases, not just against Cuba or otherwise. Now I'm really just focusing on the Cuba cases, but I do, you know, I am aware of other cases. The Pepin case is concerning. I think both sides should really settle quickly.
Mm-hmm.
I think both sides have a lot to lose from the publicity that comes from litigation. I think they're, you know, both powerful sources in the industry. And I don't think anything good comes from litigation, and that's coming from a litigator of 10 years experience. If they're listening at all, you know, they should find a way to sell the case, because I think, particularly in federal litigation, you never know what's going to happen, and there are a lot of lives and reputations, a lot of money that can be lost. So they should settle as soon as possible. I like obviously the Pepin side. I know them and everyone involved in that. The other side, I know just a little bit, but I respect them as well. So I think for the sake of the cigar industry, they should settle, because there are some serious allegations in there. and whether they're true or not, truth really has no place in federal litigation. It's all about who outspends the other person, and I think they should wrap that up.
There's going to be no winners in that one, right? If they don't settle, and if it goes the distance. All right, so one thing that's a hot topic amongst cigar bloggers and enthusiasts has to do with Sam Lucia, Oliva. I don't know how much you've read about the case, what you know, whatnot, but if you can offer any kind of words of wisdom or your take or what you think after you take a sip of Diet Coke.
No, not Diet Coke. That is actually Bacardi, Coke, and a splash of Malibu. And before you say something about Malibu,
Hey.
Alyssa, we had some people over tonight and they had it, and I said, wouldn't it be fun to throw a splash in there? Now I'm regretting it, but it's rum nonetheless.
Hey man, I'm a big fan of flavored rum myself, man. Little pineapple rum and watermelon rum. Hey man,
I'm all about the Bacardi. That is a that's another unfortunate case that certainly could have been avoided. I don't know Sam personally. I don't think I've ever spoken to him. I've seen him at some of the shows, that type of thing. I do know the Oliva family. I respect that family immensely because of the hard work, and obviously we share the kind of the Cuban culture. But that aside, I'll tell you what I thought as soon as Sam announced that he was coming out with something. The first thing that came to my mind was, wow, that's kind of soon. The Olivas run a tight ship. If I were them or if I were their counsel, there's no way that I would have allowed him to come out with something so soon. But of course, I'm not their counsel, nor have I been privy to any of the documents signed by any of the parties, nor did I ever hear any discussions about what their agreement was. Sam seems like he's a really nice person, and if he's listening, I wish him the best. But it would seem to me, and again, this is not without the benefit of going through the cases and the facts, actually. It would seem that this is a very small industry, and you want to pick your battles appropriately. If you want to be in this for the long run, it doesn't make much sense to litigate with someone who has significant roots in this industry. Now, I understand, he feels like he's been wronged, and I don't know the details of that, and I wish him the best. But again, representing companies of all sizes for over 10 years, small and very, very large companies, I was very surprised that he was announcing that he would start a new line so quickly. Now, the other side of the coin is, does Oliva really have anything to fear from him being a competitor? Not likely. In this industry, a lot of competitors are actually best friends. Right. People share a lot of information. It's very much a fraternity in a small industry. But, when money's involved and egos are involved, more importantly egos, litigation ensues. So, but again, if anybody's listening to this that's part of this, I'll tell you, litigating federal cases and state cases for 10 years, nobody wins. The only people that win are the attorneys, and in the end, the attorneys don't even win because everyone's pissed off at you. So find a way to resolve it, and resolve it soon.
Awesome. Real quick, Frank, besides your own things, more of a cigar-related question, besides your own La Caridad de Cobre things that you smoke for your blends, what else out there are you enjoying these days?
I smoke everything. I smoke the crap. I smoke the really good stuff. Obviously, I get a lot of stuff sent to me. Friends hand stuff out. I am actually smoking right now. See if I can get this up and close. Padilla's re-release. I don't know if you can see that or not.
I got you.
Do the old patented. So he is a buddy. I like him. I think he's one of the characters in the industry. And I'm enjoying this right now immensely. The Undercrown I just smoked, which I thought was pretty amazing.
Definitely.
I'm all over the place. I really am. As much as I hate the big guys, every once in a while, I'll just dip into the humidor and smoke one of their things. I like to smoke the little guy stuff. You know, anything off of Cayochel, Titan de Bronce. You know, Luis Sanchez, of course, because he makes my stuff as well. Anything, really. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. Well, I appreciate your time. Hopefully, if another question comes up, we can lean on you and do this again sometimes and get a legal expert on these things instead of us making shit up. And
yeah, don't call me an expert, but just
well, our legal expert.
Yeah. I'm not sure we answered his question, did we?
Well, not really, but I think, you know, his question was kind of everywhere. I mean, when we talked about it on the show, we were like, you know, I think there's so many different things involved, just between trademarks and regime change and so many different aspects to it, that it's not just a cut and dry yes no type of question, you know. So
yeah. Well, you're gonna it's gonna be significant if and when that opens. Obviously, there'll be a flood of Cuban brands coming in. You'll see some store owners buying into the bullshit and, you know, making more space for the Cubans as they're allowed. I think that'll come and go. And I think, you know, over the past 10 years, people have really grown to love and follow non-Cubans, you know, and there's no question of that. And they're going to smoke them, the Cubans, and then they're going to say, hey, you know, where's X? Where's Y? You know,
where's the variety? Right.
Exactly.
Well, let me ask you this, Frank. This came up in our discussion, too. Why aren't cigars that are usually in the U.S. market distributed worldwide? Why are they? Is there just not a market for things that we get here outside the U.S.?
Why aren't they?
Yeah.
Well, because the rest of the world is still inundated with Cubans. Cubans are not illegal in the remainder of the world. And the Corporation of Habanos, Cuban Tobacco, well, Corporation of Habanos, through their affiliates and their Casa de Habanos and all that, really work the international market hard. When I deposed Manuel Garcia, who was the then vice president of Corporation of Habanos, he went on and on about how he tours the world and he pushes and pushes and pushes the Cuban cigars. And quite frankly, non-Cuban cigar manufacturers don't do it. Now you're seeing over the past couple of years people attending Intertobac in Germany, which is coming up shortly. I think even Pepin is going there for the second or third year, I think. I think they're making, I think even Pete Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, is starting to do something for the international market. I think Jonathan Drew, I think I heard he's going to go there as well. I don't know in what capacity. But really, I think non-Cuban cigar manufacturers have really focused on the U.S. market and have found it profitable and have not felt the commercial need to expand internationally just yet because they're just trying to fill the U.S. need. And then, you know, you have the fact that the rest of the world still thinks that Cuban cigars are the best in the world, which, you know, may have been true at one time and may continue to be true in the future. But right now they are being beat up by the non-Cubans. We have, you know, the best cigar makers in the world right now in our time. You know, there's never been this much great tobacco available.
Well, I mean, we always go back to there's just so much more variety in the U.S. market than in the Cuban market, I think, and I think that's what sets us apart. But
one last thing I wanted to point out, we're talking about the Cubans, is I just posted that they filed 2 new trademark applications. So they filed for Habanos Point for retail store services in the United States, and then another one called Specialist Habanos. So it's my I'm surmising that they will try to use those brands in the United States. That's neighbor. Shut the fuck up. Wait a minute. I think that's our cue.
That's our cue.
So they're definitely planning on doing something here if and when the embargo is lifted. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, Frank, again, I really appreciate your time and your insight, and hope to do this again soon.